Hi, I'm Katie.
And I'm Amy.
And this is Monumental, a small show about the big things God does in the lives of ordinary people.
Sometimes it seems like missionaries are born to be that, missionaries. And they've had a deep calling, it seems like, all their lives.
They kind of sound more like superheroes, but that's not every missionary story, or probably most.
But today we get a glimpse of what was the making of a missionary, who was an unlikely candidate and who never dreamed she'd ever become a missionary.
This is the story of Cheryl Hatfield.
So how far back does that story go that led us to being at Beijing Baptist Church?
Right, yeah.
It actually goes back to our dating days. I remember sitting in Mark's house, in a mill house in Seneca, probably late 1984, and we were talking about marriage, talking about future.
Those big questions.
The big questions,
Yeah.
you know, are we matched well enough to be together?
Yeah.
And he starts talking about, how would you like to serve overseas? And I said, no interest, not at all. And that was the end of that conversation. But we did get married.
Yeah.
Okay. So you thought that settled that.
I thought it settled that. I thought that was done.
Yeah.
You know, but he decided we could still get married in 1985.
So was that just like, I'm going to throw this out there, or is it something that he had always had in the back of his mind, like, I might like to really do this?
I think he always had it in the back of his mind. Many, many years later, after we had moved into our second house, and I was cleaning out files and things that get moved when you move.
Right.
There's papers and papers and papers of mission organizations about,
He was like,
He was really thinking about that.
He was thinking about this.
Okay.
So then, of course, I ditched those real fast.
Don't give him any ideas.
So,
We don't want to remind him of that.
No. And so I thought that topic, of course, was done.
Right. Yeah.
Until he decides in 2005 to go to seminary.
So that you were married in 85. So
That's right. And of course, as we were talking, in between, we had led a normal life, comfortable, it's good.
Yeah.
We met the Fenimores, Jim and Marge. We met your family.
Right.
So your family, Amy,
Yeah.
getting to know your family, getting to know the Fenimores, probably 10 years apart, 1985, getting to know the Fenimores, 1995, getting to know your family,
Right.
realizing, you know, your dad has designs and desires to go overseas.
Right.
What does that look like? Watching you guys talking.
Figuring that out.
Yeah. Knowing that you guys are real people.
Yeah.
And so it helped me kind of process some of that and think.
Because you had kind of had in your mind, like, missionaries are
Those
these
people.
big, like these
That's what
holy
everybody
people who
thinks,
have it all
right?
together.
They're
And
like, everything has it all together. They're kind of like superhumans, right?
yeah.
Right.
But-
right. And so I think that helped ground my thinking that, you know, and of course over the years we got to know your family, got to visit, got to talk. And so a lot of those things really did help. We did.
Our flaws and our quirks and that
You were
things
real
difficult.
people.
Yeah, it's not-
Real people and things. The questions, like, because I remember you and I, what is biblical? What is cultural? What is American? What is Christian? And those things have always rung in my head. And jumping ahead, when we're working with internationals, what is biblical? What is cultural? What is biblical? What is American?
Right.
You know. So working through what's good for us, what's good for our family, looking at different seminaries. He was about to sign on with one in Greenville that required chapel every single day at 11 o'clock. Mark has a construction business.
Right.
That didn't work.
The two didn't really
it didn't
jive.
work.
Yeah.
Until at the very last minute, somebody told him about Gordon Conwell in Charlotte that they did weekend classes.
Yeah.
They did week-long modules. They did online.
Yeah.
And so immediately that's where he went, and that's what he did.
Right.
So your husband was in construction. What did you do?
I was home with the kids, 4 kids. At that time, we were homeschooling. They were all teenagers. So Kristen was a senior in high school when he started. So then we're looking at colleges for her and, you know, working out the homeschool, high school curriculums for the kids.
Right. They're all in some crucial times in their life.
Yeah. They are. And we always wonder, is it better for a guy to go to seminary when they're babies?
Right.
Yeah.
Or when they're teenagers?
Yeah.
It's tough either way.
Right, right.
It's tough either way.
Yeah.
But the Lord was good, and But those were
So he ended up going.
He did go.
Yeah.
He started in 2005, finished in 2011. So he went part-time, worked at Hatfield Builders.
Right.
Part-time, sort of.
Oh, what was Mark's thought or direction when he said, I'm going to seminary? Like,
Was he thinking, okay, this
Yeah.
is because I want to go into the pastorate, or because I'm thinking I want to go do overseas work?
Probably both. Mm-hmm. Both. And I think it probably kind of evolved as time went on. But to get the Master of Divinity, you can do a lot.
oh, what were you feeling or thinking when he's doing the seminary thing? And I'm sure it probably bubbled up some, like, is he going to push me towards, like, wanting to do something that I'm totally not comfortable with? Or, like, what was happening to you?
Okay, so here's a journal entry I wrote, and it may answer that question. When Mark first talked about going to seminary, I really was not for the idea. He keeps very busy with work and often burns the candle at both ends anyway. God has been working in his life to calm him down, to make him a more godly person. Just an insert here, we struggled with anger in our marriage for a long time. And so I'm thinking, how does this work? How do you go to seminary if you're angry in the family, in the marriage?
Right, sure.
So in looking over the qualifications of elders in 1 Timothy 3, I've always had trouble seeing Mark in that picture. Above reproach was my biggest stumbling block because of the anger issues. And again, I do have to say, I have seen much growth in him in the last few months and years. Our home is much more peaceful. Remembering this was written in November 2005.
Yeah.
For years, I prayed that God would give him a hunger and thirst for righteousness. I believe God is answering that prayer. However, I also knew if God did answer that prayer, I would have to adjust to those changes. The adjusting is sometimes difficult for me. The known is difficult.
Yeah.
But often it is better than the unknown. So here's where I have a real issue. And this was me. I do not want to be a pastor's wife or serve overseas. I've never had those desires. Before we married, Mark asked me if I would serve overseas. I said no.
So you're recalling, hey, we had this conversation, and I
thought
said
this
no.
was- I thought this was done.
settled.
And he has no recollection of that
He
at
has
all.
no
Oh, he doesn't
recollection
remember
of
that
that.
conversation.
But to you, of course, you're like,
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So I thought I'd never hear it again. I am not the evangelist type. I don't do well with people. I much prefer to be in the background. And yet, in some ways, I feel like I'm fighting against God here. If God leads Mark in this direction, who am I not to go along? I just thought of Moses, who came up with every reason not to be the leader God wanted him to be. And so those were feelings I was wrestling with
Right.
at the beginning of his seminary journey.
Yeah.
Even going forward to January of 2006.
He's got a semester under his belt.
Correct. Another Sunday night difficult discussion before he left for a week-long intensive class centered around his desires to serve overseas or pastor, and me having no such desires. Don't you have desires for something else, is basically what he said. No, I have no desires beyond what I'm doing right now. Right now, my life centers on our kids, their development, their education. I feel my rebellious heart against God's authority. Can God forgive and change that?
Mm-hmm. So you were beginning to feel unsettled. Okay, you have this issue with your husband, but your relationship with God was, you were feeling unsettled
Yes.
about that.
Yes.
That there's something
Yes.
wrong
And I did not
here.
want to go that route.
Right.
And I felt like God was making me go that route.
Yeah.
I'm committed to my husband.
Right.
So I'm in conflict here.
You're feeling-
With myself.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And God.
Right.
So here's another journal entry,
Yeah.
March 2006. One common thought pattern is my feeling of inadequacy for mission work. I know my resistance is rebelling against God. I ask God to remove my lack of faith. I don't want that responsibility or accountability of being a pastor's wife or missionary wife. I must admit that the missionaries I know are real people. They live like I do. They struggle with everyday things. They struggle with family relationships. They serve in their homes. I feel like I have nothing to offer. I feel like Moses felt.
So earlier on, you had this idea of a missionary personality caricature. I'm not that.
Right.
I can't do that.
Right. For whatever that
No,
is.
you said
whatever
earlier
that
you
is,
don't
that
feel like
idea.
an evangelist, and you're thinking, oh, missionaries, they have to be evangelists
That's
and,
right. That's
and
right.
I'm a-
extroverts and out
I'm
there
a-
with
And that's not me.
people. And yeah.
And so now you're, as the Lord's pushing
Yeah.
you and your husband's pushing you, but I'm not adequate for this. I can't do this.
But then at
I'm
the
not
same
made for
time,
this.
you're seeing other families who
They're just
are
real. They're just real.
Yeah.
normal people with normal struggles like you, and they're doing it. They're
But that
doing
didn't really
mission work.
support your
You weren't there
desire
yet.
to not go.
Right.
But it was a beginning
Right.
work.
Yeah.
Right. The comment, though, following up on that journal entry, I was sitting in a room. I was at a homeschool co-op, I think in a study hall, and there was a poster on the wall, and there was a verse from Exodus 4:12. God said to Moses, "Now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say." And it just kind of hit me. I was like, oh, no, that's not what I want to hear. Right.
Did you tell Mark any of this kind of what your train of thought?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I think he was so focused
Yeah.
on studies. And of course, we were busy with the kids.
Right.
But you guys asked a question, something about, I forgot what it was. But it made me think of, as time went on, the issues we had with anger, or how did that stress for the seminary, at what point? There was a turning point, I think, in 2007. Kristen went to visit you. When she was there, we decided to do a home redo. We would put hardwood floors in the kitchen. We would paint the kitchen walls. She's out. It's good. I don't know how much
people. Yeah.
fewer people.
This is your daughter.
Kristen, our daughter, oldest, spent 2 months with the Donnell family, and then we realized, great time to do a house project. Mark's in seminary. It's summer. It's just probably not a very smart thing to do. So that brought a lot of stress for us. And I remember Kristen coming back, and she said, that was the worst summer ever. And it wasn't because of you. It was because when she got back, things were just blowing up.
She felt the stress at home.
She felt the stress. I think she felt the tension. There was a moment at which, the hardwood floors, which I wanted to I thought it'd be cool to put them in ourselves. My grandparents did that.
Construction company,
That's right.
Right.
We can do this.
I like projects.
Right.
So just to kind of tell you what it was like, by midsummer, I'd had enough. I'd said, you know what? I'm done. I'm driving down Woodruff Road. My tears are streaming down my face. I said, I can't do the stress. I can't do the anger. I'm done with this marriage. And even as I was reviewing some of this, I thought, man, those are raw, I've looked at this enough now, I think it's not as raw. But thinking back, I was done with our marriage, and I couldn't take it more. But as I cried...
You had been having fights, but you weren't really talking about what you were thinking about, not wanting to go do overseas work.
Well, and I think it was probably a buildup of everything. I don't think it was necessarily
It wasn't even
about,
just that.
No.
Yeah.
I think we always had trouble during stressful times. It was, and Mark will tell you, it was sinful, explosive anger.
Yeah.
And sinful, explosive anger is directed at a person,
Right.
not so much an issue.
Right.
And I think the Lord has helped us, as time has gone on, point more to the issue and work through the issue. But that was just a very hard summer. It was seminary, it was house, it was kids in college. It was everything.
It was a whole culmination.
It
of
was,
things,
and then of course my feelings of I don't want to do this,
And I
overseas
don't
stuff.
want to do it. He's asking me to do.
Right.
Exclamation point.
Right. And so it was all together.
Yep.
So I'm driving down the road, Woodruff Road, tears are streaming down my face, and I think all these things are going through my head.
Yeah.
I thought how bad a divorce would look for somebody who's in seminary who wants to be a pastor. What does that look like?
Right.
I thought of our kids. What do you tell your kids? What does it look like for a person who claims to be God-fearing to throw in the towel on marriage? What kind of example does that set for our kids? I thought of the vows and commitments that we made before God and witnesses. What would divorce look like for someone who believes in the rightness of marriage?
Yeah.
And so all these things are going through my head. I'm driving down the road, and I thought of Jesus and why he came. And so then I started backtracking. Why did Jesus come? He came to die for my sins, for my anger, for my rebellion. Essentially, I was preaching the gospel to myself. It felt like a long time, but it was just a matter of minutes. I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So recommitted and said, no, I'm going to keep the vows we made. and maybe our marriage doesn't look pretty, but it will be intact. You know, and that was 2007, in the middle of the summer, where it was hellish for us.
Yeah, right.
I had to come back to who is Jesus? What did he do? Did he really die for these sins? And, you know, we've been married 35 years now.
Right.
The Lord has been gracious. We've learned, as I would say, maybe success strategies. When there's tension, what do we do?
Yeah.
But that was a turning point.
Was he also willing to say, yeah, we need help?
Let me follow up with that.
Okay.
Because that was July.
Okay. Right.
August, at Christina and Ryan Drama's wedding.
Yes.
Were you there?
Yes.
Your daughter's wedding?
I was
A friend,
in it.
a mutual friend.
Oh, a friend. Okay.
A friend. Mark decides to throw in the towel at the reception. He tells me, he says, at the reception, I'm done.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, that was hard. Naturally, I was crushed because I had just a few weeks before committed to stay together. And so, yes, we get counseling. And
So you guys really both in the same place with your marriage?
Yes.
Thinking this is falling apart.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, Jamie Howe was at the wedding reception, and he's watching this fall apart at the reception.
You
Both
had a
of you.
fight at the reception.
Well, yeah,
you were.
probably.
Yeah.
You know, as much as you can hide it from the public.
Yeah, right.
You know, but yeah.
But your pastor he knew you well enough to kind of see what was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're so, you know, kudos to Jamie, who knows us really well.
Who knew you, picked up on all of it. And
Yeah. So like I said, this year we celebrated 35 years. We've committed to stay together. We've worked. I think God has just grown us, though. I can't say we've done any specific thing to fix our marriage, but praying, seeking the Lord. And I would say I'm glad we didn't decide to stop and quit.
So what happened though? Your pastor sees things are falling apart here. He came to you guys and said, "Okay, we need to sit
get
down.
together. We need to sit down
We gotta
together."
do this.
So did you start meeting with him regularly?
I don't know how often we did. You know, that's now. That's in the past. I don't remember, but we did. I remember sitting on our back porch, talking through things, and it could have been several times. But he was really good in helping us come back together.
yeah.
So that's a lot of background.
Yeah.
How we got to Beijing, because it just goes to show that God is using all parts of our lives to get to the end story.
Right.
You know. So just to kind of wrap up Mark's seminary years, he graduated in 2011.
So he continued. He even with your marriage struggles, he said, or you guys decided, keep going.
Well, in my head, there were times I said, well, if he never finishes, at least he's better off. He's got more training than
he had before.
Right. So in my head, that was fine.
No harm.
I'm always of the kind, you finish what you start. But I wasn't sure I wanted what the end of that was.
Where it might lead.
I'll be okay if you
Just stop now. It's okay.
Right.
You're better off than what
we
you
can
were.
fudge on this one. It's okay.
So yeah, see, that was still me struggling.
That was you.
Yeah.
But when he finished in 2011, someone told him not to jump into ministry position right away. Let the learning sink in.
Yeah.
And see, he had gone to seminary when our kids were 17 to 11.
Right.
Finished when they were 23 to 17.
Yeah.
So we needed time to rebuild our family.
Yeah.
Come back together. So he went back to Hatfield Builders and just kind of let it soak in.
Yeah.
So 2012 started kind of things rolling. He actually met a pastor, Steve Graham, from Massachusetts, who had come down, got to talk, and Steve said, "Hey, I'm going to Russia in October. You want to come along?" He would go for a month to train pastors and teach in a Bible school, and he had a contact there. So Mark said, "Hey, yeah." So Mark went for a month.
What did you say to that?
I said, "Okay."
You're like, as long as it's him, it's
That's
fine.
right. You can go. That's right.
I don't have to go.
That's
Sign
right.
him up.
That's right. That's right. So he did that. He did that fall of 2012. And then that kind of started an idea rolling. He said he wanted to transition out of construction into ministry. Well, you have a company and you've got employees and you've got people depending on you. How do you do that?
Right.
So he came up with a 1, 2, 3 plan. And the 1 month in Russia was that one. 2 was a 2-month internship with John Miller in Clarksville, Tennessee, to be an intern. and to help there. And the 3
An
was
intern doing what?
kind of being a pastoral intern.
For a couple months?
Yes.
And did you go with him to
yes,
that? Okay.
That was March, April 2013. I went.
Okay.
I didn't need to go 1 month in Russia, but for 2 months I was be there, and it was 7 hours away.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then that kind of got him rolling. Hey, maybe we can do 3 months. Same idea. Pastoral intern with Chris Powell in Toronto,
Canada.
Fall 2013. Right. So that was kind of the long range plan.
1, 2, 3 plan.
1, 2, 3.
And you still had one kid at home at this point?
Philip graduated from 2012. He was
First
year of college.
Okay.
So that year, he was the first.
So
freshman.
it was a really great timing for that.
It was. You know, no kids at home.
Yeah.
Still fairly local. I mean, not too far.
So you were done with homeschooling.
Correct.
And you were okay
more
with
time.
that.
Right.
So what did you think about that?
I said, well, you can do anything for a short period of time. So at that point, you know, he's done the Russia trip. We're preparing for the Tennessee 2 months in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we realized God in His sovereignty had a different plan. A pastor in Beijing was looking for someone to hold and steward finances and money that people were donating to Beijing Baptist Church, donating to get tax deductions.
Right.
And the church that they were working with decided they didn't want to do it anymore. So could we help? And Bob Self, gracious and kind and willing as he said, sure.
Bob Self is
was our pastor at the time
Okay.
at Grace Baptist.
Okay.
And Bob then asks a very innocent but life-changing question to Pastor Joe. He says, is there anything else you need? And he said, actually there is. I would like to come back to the States. Beijing Baptist Church needs a pastor. So and that was a very innocent
little thing.
question, you know. And Bob responded. He said, oh, I have just the man for you.
No, he did not.
A guy named Mark Hatfield. He did. He did.
Oh.
He did. So Mark responded. He wrote to Pastor Joe, sent a simple email introducing himself, answering a few questions, and that was it. So I did not know that was going on. I had no idea. No idea. January 3rd, 2013, Mark receives an email from Beijing Baptist Church that says, you're our candidate for pastoral candidate for Beijing Baptist Church. I have no, and
you didn't know anything.
I didn't know anything
point.
about this.
We did not sign that. For that.
Right. And we always,
your husband had an email, so he knew that they were considering him.
So what was going on is he was emailing them from his work email at the office. And I did not know.
You weren't seeing
I wasn't seeing any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Did he not think it would come to anything?
Probably not.
Yeah, he's like,
just this
and he
little
didn't want to
email.
freak you out about it, maybe? Or,
Until it was a real.
Right.
Did he agree to being the pastor or interviewing or?
What we decided to do, the best way is to go visit.
Okay.
So to take a go and see trip. But remember, this is in the middle of planning to go to Tennessee.
Right.
For 2 months.
You're on your 1, 2, 3 step
That's
plan.
right.
Yeah.
And so this is we're planning to go to Tennessee, and it turns out that Pastor Joe, his wife is about to have a baby at the end of February.
Okay.
And they are moving back in June.
Like it's happening.
So
no
they're
matter what.
looking for somebody ASAP.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So the best thing to do is to visit. So we planned a 10-day trip to visit Beijing and Beijing Baptist Church in the middle of that March, April.
But that's a pretty big step for you from where you're coming from in your previous, journal entries and trains of thought about, I'm not doing that.
No way.
No. To
Okay, let's go over
visit.
there and
Right,
see.
exactly.
That's a huge jump. And I know it's taken 30 years, but that's a big difference.
And I think that's God
willingness.
working, recognizing we're empty nesters.
You were at a different
And we were
season of
talking
life.
about 2 years.
Going for 2 years.
Going for
and so you're
2
ting,
years.
okay, it's still a semi-short-term thing.
Right.
Yeah.
9
okay.
months there, the idea in summer, home, and 9 months there to be the interim.
Yeah.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
Right. So, if you know something's short, sure,
Sure,
try it for a
it's
couple
easier
years.
to commit
It's
to
really
something.
like
if you don't
God was
think-
like easing you into everything.
Yeah, right.
Like, okay, like he actually knows our frame,
Yeah.
right? And he knows that we're dust, and he knows our weaknesses.
One of the things that Mark and I did talk about, if he had designs and ideas to go overseas, we knew we were in our 50s. We knew we needed to be in English.
Yeah.
Learning another language, to preach in another language, and
That's
your
a whole other
dad
thing.
or Jim Adams or different. We talked to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
7 to 10 years of intensive language study.
Yes.
Yeah.
To preach in that language.
Right.
Yes.
We were in our 50s. We were not young whippersnappers.
Right.
And the 50-year-old brain doesn't learn language like a 20-year-old brain does.
Yeah.
So we kind of had these criteria. One of them was we had to be able to come and be with our kids when they needed us in the summer. They were still young adults. It had to be in English. And so Beijing Baptist Church, that situation fit
all of that.
It did.
Yeah.
And so 2 years, come home in the summer, it's all in English.
Yeah.
Now, we recognized going in that we needed to have language because
Right.
we landed and you better know some Chinese.
Yeah, you need to have some. Yeah.
You're still
You do.
going international.
You are.
Right.
You are. But our focus was international, so everybody we worked with spoke English.
You needed it to,
Shop for
buy
groceries?
milk,
Yes.
but
Yep.
not
Yep.
necessarily not for ministry.
Right, right. We pondered, we prayed, we planned about the opportunity with Beijing Baptist Church. What we've learned in this process, getting passports updated, visas and tickets, is that mobilization takes time and is stressful.
Yeah.
Therefore, it makes sense to go for extended periods, not short jaunts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And these were some of my thoughts. Journey, life. Life is a journey, always changing, always moving, always new.
Yeah.
But God never changes.
Yep.
God never moves in the same sense. God remains the same. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. I'm so thankful I have a constant, faithful, and unchanging God. He directs, guides, lives, loves, leads, but most importantly, saves and sanctifies. And that was the sanctifying process. To follow up with that, 2 days later, I wrote a journal entry on March 17, 2013, to show you where we were.
Right.
Sometimes I don't like living the faith stories because they're hard. They require patience, trust, and lack of control, at least on my part.
Yep.
I'm thankful that we have a sovereign God who not only created all things and fills all things, but also knows all things. He knows exactly when we need our visas. He knows exactly where they are. That particular piece of faith story challenged my faith and sense of rightness. In order to visit China, I needed a new passport, and we both needed visas. After much contact with the visa agency, we eventually received our passports with visas in a FedEx envelope less than 24 hours before our flight to China.
Whoa.
Talk about angst. And Mark will never, ever let me forget that was the time I was yelling at the agency because they didn't get my passport. God does these things, and he brings us to the brink of trust.
Yes.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
And we had to leave at 7 a.m. that day, and I think it was 9 o'clock at night, the night before we got our...
Wow.
That is
That's amazing.
It was insane. It was. And
Yeah.
so, all of these things, those open doors, it's like God is doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I cannot do this.
You couldn't. There's
Yeah.
no way you
Yeah.
could have.
He's bringing you to the end of yourself so
Yeah.
that you're ready to do
Totally.
his work.
Yeah, totally.
And at the same time, though, he's also showing you that missionary work isn't just going out and sharing the gospel and talking to all these people and leading Bible studies, but it's doing the everyday, oftentimes the mundane, being faithful and trusting him in those things.
Totally.
And you're like, okay,
Totally.
I've been doing that work actually.
Which goes back to your dad's comment. It's
Right.
all the things I've already been doing
Right.
my whole life in a different context.
Just in a different place. Yeah.
Yeah. True.
So God is beginning to answer your questions. What is ministry? What is a missionary? What is this?
So we did visit Beijing, and we went for
How
10
long?
days.
Oh,
10
okay.
days. We fell in love with the people. It reminded us of our home church. The friendliness.
Yeah.
They were welcoming. We thought, you know what? For 2 years, we
could do this.
We can do this.
Yeah.
I know. But there were things that had to fall in place. We came back from that trip recognizing, okay.
God was unifying you and Mark, though, with that.
He was. We were together. We felt like we could do this together. We were doing things at home in Greenville that we actually ended up doing the same thing.
There.
Having people in our home.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, doing guys' night where we had guys come over for dinner and discipleship. And so we just kind of transferred what we did in Greenville to Beijing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Really.
Yep. Yeah.
So coming back from Beijing, we said, okay, Lord, if you want us to do 6 things here that have to happen. And he did. The Lord provided.
Yeah.
Those doors
It's going to happen.
flew so wide open
Yeah.
that it became very evident that God wanted us to be in Beijing.
Yeah.
And we went with the idea to be there for 2 years.
Yeah.
We stayed for 6.
So was this very affirming to you in your faith in this move?
To see all these things.
all these
Yes.
things.
Yes, it was. And I think he was doing a work in our heart to say, well, we can still have guys' night. We can still have people over for dinner.
Yeah.
We can, you know.
And so your husband was preaching while he was there because he was called there to be pastor.
He was called there to be the pastor. So, of course, he does the normal pastor things. I tried to explain him, okay, so what does the pastor do? Well, he preaches, of course.
Right.
You know, disciples and mentors, a lot of counseling. Sometimes it's groups, sometimes it's couples, dating couples, marriage issues, you name it. It's life. It's life.
Yeah.
And, you know, I actually loved it.
Yeah.
I really did enjoy it.
I think that's what's so neat about your story and God leading you to serve in another country is that he brought you through a long road of recognizing your weaknesses, your struggles, working through them, bringing you to the end of yourself, showing your need for him, breaking down this perception of missionaries that you had to be sort of ultra holy or have a particular personality. And through all of that, he was just really preparing you for serving in another country in a really effective way, where you can now meet with people who are having marriage struggles or wanting to get married or struggles with kids or thinking about, school or work, whatever the issues were. And you were like, yeah, we've been there. We know.
Right. And I often think, okay, had this been 30 years ago, we wouldn't have the same life stories to help people. And the thing, it was really kind of fun because we were one of the oldest couples there. We were the parents to all the others. And so to me, as I've grown and I've realized, okay, what does God want me to do? I'm a mom at heart.
So you continued that work when you got there.
I did, and I loved it. And Mark and I have talked about that now. That's what I love.
Right.
It's what our pastors often refer to as mothers in Israel. And they talk a lot about women being mothers in Israel. And you're a mother of Israel in the church. That is much of what women are called to be, is mothers in Israel. Whether we have children or not, whether we're empty nesters or single or, whatever wherever situation she finds herself in, to be a mother in Israel. And that was what you held on to and loved so much with your own children. But God continued to use you in that way.
And I think that also made it hard to leave Beijing when it became very evident. If God opened the doors for us to go, people said, how long are you going to stay? I said, well, God made it clear. We're going to go. He'll make it clear. And he did. And I mean, for me, that was hard because I was leaving spiritual children. Friends that I loved that were my kids' ages that I could help and watch and watch them grow in the Lord. And young moms who had small children. But I think my heart was to be a mom. It's still my heart. And so now people say, okay, so what are you going to do in the U.S.? I said, I don't know.
I'm going to be a mom.
Keep doing it. You're going to keep doing it.
Well, funny thing you say, because God has opened doors where we had people in our home. The house we kept. I came back and I'm kind of rattling around in this house. I'm thinking, God, this is so big. We don't need this house. Lord, just fill it. Just feel it. So 3 different occasions we've had people living with us.
That's cool.
I know. International students. And so people would always ask me then, okay, so now we decided it was time to come back. Now what do we do? Just doing the same normal things that we've done, again, in a different context.
Right.
Yeah.
What is it? Again, what is ministry?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. We're here. We're here until God makes it clear to go someplace else.
Right.
I think once you've been overseas, it does give you, I noticed even the people that we knew in Beijing, it gives them an itch.
Yes. Yes. You're always ready to go.
Always ready to go. But I'm really thankful. I'm really thankful for the way God worked in me.
Yeah.
You're right. Going from, hey, I'm not going anywhere overseas, to now flying all over the world. And I think there's only one continent I haven't been on now. So some of it's adventure. Some of it's just seeing how God is going to work. Yeah.
Yeah, he's given you more faith now to be open to unknowns and unexpected.
Yeah. And so we're here. We're here for however long.
Well, Titus 2 women and mothers of Israel always needed, and there's a huge lack of them. And the younger generations may not know it, how much we need Titus 2 women, but we need them desperately. And
see, for me, that's always, I'm like, again, that's that woman, or I can't do that. Or, that's
Titus 2 woman.
It's my brain, my head.
You are that. That's what I'm saying, is you are that. You've been that. You've done that in Beijing. I think you just need to keep doing it.
In some ways, it's in part that attitude that probably, I think, makes it so helpful, because God is honored to work through weak people.
Yes.
And you not coming to the table, coming to ministry saying, all right, I've got this all figured out and I've got all this
stuff to offer everybody.
Yeah, you're coming to the table saying, I'm weak, I've struggled, I've been through hard things, I need the gospel, I keep needing the gospel, and I love being a mother, and I care about people. And then you see, some people come along who have a need, and you can meet them where they are with an understanding and a genuine just understanding of what they need, what they're going through and what they need. And I just think that's ministry.
It is.
And that's why I think of the tapestry.
Yeah.
Because we're on the underside looking at all these strings and thinking, these
it looks so confusing to us.
It's, they're long and they're twisted, they're knotted, and they just are awful looking. But God is weaving a story that he knows what he's doing.
Right.
And that's beautiful.
And it is beautiful. And when you think of a tapestry is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I often had to think of that, especially on those hard days. It's like, God, what are you doing? I don't see this. And looking forward, what is God going to do?
Right.
I don't know, but looking back, he's been faithful every time.
Right.
And so he will be faithful. There were times in my life, separate from all this stuff, that I would wrestle with faith in Christ.
Yeah.
But I always came back to, who is Christ?
Yeah.
Is he who he says he is?
Yeah.
Does he do what he says he will do? The answer is yes, and it's all right here in our life, because I think without those Ebenezer's, those markers, those polished monuments, I wouldn't see it as much, and it was obvious God was doing this.
Monumental is hosted by Katie Walker and Amy Molina. It's produced and edited by Katie Walker, and it is executive produced by Nathan Alberson and Jake Menzel. If you like the show, please don't forget to rate and review in the app of your choice. And if you're interested in more great content, including articles and other podcasts, please visit warhornmedia.com.